Let's look at professional life. How we exercise our anger at work. Obviously, you don't shout, you don't scream, but because you know there's going to be consequences. But we express our anger in different subtle ways at work because we know that we can't do the things that we do at home. So long before neuroscience discovered the amygdala, the ancient scholars described anger with incredible accuracy. They explained that people fall into four different categories. I'm going to suggest some other out of the box solutions which not only will give you control in that instant moment when you're feeling angry, but even prior to that, as a build up, it will weaken that emotion inside of you so you're not lashing out and getting angry at the slightest trigger. And these things are what will help you control that animal inside of you. Today I want to talk about an emotion that every one of us has felt in our lives, an emotion that has damaged relationships, broken friendships, destroyed families, destroyed opportunities, and causes regret. And in some cases has changed the direction of a person's life. And what is that emotion? It's the emotion of anger. The truth is, you don't really get to know yourself when you're calm. You don't get to know yourself when everything is going your way. You don't get to know yourself when nobody challenges you. You discover your real self when something scratches your ego, when someone says something that stings, when life pushes you, when a situation exposes your insecurity. That's when you really lash out, and the anger inside of you comes out when you feel disrespected or powerless. And that's what they say, the real you comes out and becomes apparent to all those around you. In reality, most people don't have an anger problem. They have an ego problem that expresses itself through anger. Anger is the mask. The ego is the face behind it. Today we're going to break down anger in a way you probably never heard before. We're going to dissect this psychologically in a neuroscientific way through ancient wisdom and modern behavior. We're going to peel it back layer by layer until you see exactly why you get angry, what it reveals about you, and how you can take back control. Because if you don't understand your anger will understand you and manipulate you from the inside. Let's start with the brain. So long before neuroscience discovered the amygdala, the ancient scholars described anger with incredible accuracy. They explained that people fall into four different categories. Number one, when anger overpowers reason, this produces the explosive personality, impulsive, unpredictable, destructive. Number two, when reason overpowers anger, this produces the stable person, firm but calm, strong but controlled. Number three, when a person has almost no anger, this produces a weak type of a person, someone who tolerates disrespect, injustice, and is easily manipulated. Number four, the balanced person. This is the ideal, excuse me, this is the ideal anger only, but when appropriate, in the right amount, for the right reasons, aimed at the right target. So anger isn't meant to be suppressed. It's meant to be disciplined. The goal isn't never to get angry. The goal is don't let anger become the ego's weapon. Let me say something very important. Not all anger is bad. Anger is actually good for you as well. Think about that for a moment. If someone harms your family, should you feel anger? Of course you should. That doesn't mean that you should think, oh, I should never get angry. It's not good to get angry. That is the moment to get angry. If someone violates your boundaries, you should get angry, because otherwise you'll be showing your weakness. You'll be showing people that you have no boundaries and they can do whatever they like with you. If you see injustice, you should feel angry. And what a pity on a man who does not get angry when seeing injustice. You should get angry when you see injustice. This is moral anger. It protects, it defends, and stands up for your values. But when anger becomes dangerous, it is when it is ego driven. Ego anger is the one that is the most dangerous. Like, how dare you talk to me like that? How dare you ignore me? How dare you challenge me? How dare you not do what I expect? Moral anger protects values. Ego protects pride. And most people cannot tell the difference. Now, let me expose something uncomfortable. Most people practice selective anger. I want you to think about this carefully. Do you practice selective anger? And just think for a moment, what does that mean? What am I referring to? That's when people get angry only at people they believe are weaker than them. A husband shouts at his wife but is polite to his boss. A parent screams at a child but stays calm with strangers. Someone abuses a waiter but smiles at the manager. Someone bullies online but freezes in real confrontation. Anger becomes brave only when the ego feels safe. This isn't strength, this is cowardice. Anyone can erupt when they know that the other person won't fight back. The true strength is staying calm even when you could overpower someone. If you want to know a person's character, watch how they treat people who cannot benefit them or harm them. This is an example I often give, that look horizontally in terms of the rest of the creation, how you treat them. And if you treat people, I mean, it's easy to be good to the one who's stronger than you, richer than you, more powerful than you. But if you treat the weaker person in a sort of disrespectful, insulting way, that means that you are not a sincere person. Because if you had sincerity, you treat everybody the same and you only select. So those are the people who most often like get the wrath of our anger because they are weaker than us. And if you don't express the same anger on people who are more stronger than you, then your anger is selective and based on a model of cowardice. It's as simple as that. Let's give another example. Football fans. Look how rivals behave. They show anger, they insult each other, they show aggression, sometimes violence, all for the teams that they don't play for. Managers they never met, colors they didn't choose, matches they didn't participate in. Why? Because football gives the ego a tribe, a badge, a symbolic identity. My side versus your side. When the ego attaches itself to a group identity, anger becomes tribal. Logic disappears. Look how fans will scream at each other, fight each other, insult each other, but outside that context, those same two people might get along perfectly. And most of the times they're fighting, hurting someone they don't even know. There's no real reason for them to be fighting other than the fact that they wear a different colored shirt. The anger was never personal. It was based on ego, driven by their ego. And this is the same tribal ego that appears in families, workplaces, politics, friendships, anywhere the ego forms a side. Ancient scholars and teachings explain that inside each human being is a predatory layer of the ego, a survival based in an animal that was part of that is the part of you that activates that emotion when you feel disrespected, you feel rejected, you feel out of control, or you feel insecure, or somebody's hurt you, you've felt overlooked or ignored. In these moments, anger isn't reacting to the situation. It's reacting to the ego's fear of feeling small and belittled. This is why a tiny comment can trigger a huge explosion. It's not the comment, it's what the ego interprets it to mean. Until you train this inner animal, it will continue to dominate your responses. And that's one of the best ways of describing this ego inside of us. It's like an untrained animal that is constantly barking. is constantly trying to bite and harm people. Until you don't train it and tame it, it's going to have that destructive, explosive, impulsive behavior all the time. So there's another dimension to anger that goes unnoticed. It's called silent anger. Now, not the shouting type, not the explosive type. It's the quiet, simmering type. The type that withdraws, becomes cold, distant, rigid. The type that refuses to speak, refuses to engage, refuses to resolve. The anger doesn't break things, but it breaks the people from the inside. A person might not shout. This is often common in close relationships. A husband and wife may, over something that they disapprove of or do not like, they experience this silent treatment. One spouse or even both of them start giving each other silent treatment. And they say the silent treatment can be more destructive, more harmful than a shouting match when they're actually fighting and screaming at each other, when one of them withdraws or feels that the other is not worthy of their company or communication or even an apology. They won't raise their voice, as I've said, they won't argue. Instead, they've actually withdrawn and they go silent. They withhold affection, they retreat emotionally, they punish with that silence and distance. Many relationships die slowly from that silent anger, not from explosive anger. Silence can be louder than shouting. Silence can hurt more than words. Silence can destroy emotional safety without making a sound. This is anger disguised as peace. Let's look at professional life. How we exercise our anger at work. Obviously, you don't shout, you don't scream, but because you know there's going to be consequences. But we express our anger in different subtle ways at work because we know that we can't do the things that we do at home. At work, we may show some sarcasm to our colleagues, we withhold information, we undermine them, we do like this passive sabotage, show this cold professionalism, maybe roll our eyes. Even spouses do that. Gossip. We delay our responses or delay our cooperation, and we have this sort of tactical silence. This is how the ego expresses anger in the corporate workplace and corporate environments. It doesn't explode, it corrodes. A modern psychology shows that unresolved anger in the workplace is one of the biggest drivers of burnout. People burn out emotionally before they burn out physically. Unprocessed anger becomes exhaustion. Exhaustion becomes disengagement. Disengagement becomes resentment. There's also a difference between the way men and women express their anger, not because of stereotypes, but because of the way they are emotionally wired. Like men would perhaps storm out, use force, raise their voice, then probably break things. Women often internalize that anger, emotional withdrawal, be a bit more cold, tears of frustration, indirect communication, and neither expression is better or worse. They're simply just different manifestations of the same ego reacting to the discomfort, which ultimately results in anger. Many couples misunderstand each other's anger. A man thinks a woman's tears are manipulation, but sometimes they're a sign of emotional overwhelm. Sometimes a woman thinks a man's shouting is aggression, but very often it's unprocessed shame or insecurity. Understanding these patterns can save relationships. Here's a truth most people don't want to hear. Behind most anger is shame. When someone feels embarrassed, they feel rejected, humiliated, they feel criticized. That insecurity, when it's exposed, that is when people are expressing their anger. The ego reacts with anger to protect itself. This is especially common in men. So when a man feels a hurt, instead of expressing vulnerability, he expresses the anger. The anger becomes a mask that hides those emotional wounds. And many women don't know this. They interpret the anger as hostility, not realizing it might be unprocessed pain. Likewise, men don't understand why women become emotional during conflict. They mistake emotional expression for overreaction when actually it is the ego responding differently. Now, listen carefully. Anger feels powerful. It gives a temporary rush. It creates a sense of domination. It gives this like sense of illusionary control. It boosts the cortisol. It makes the ego feel alive. Some people become addicted to that rush. They think that anger is what helps them reclaim their territory. It helps them reclaim their dominance. They don't even realize that it's the anger that gives them attention, validation, emotional release, a sense of identity, a feeling of significance. For many people, anger is the only moment they feel in control. That's why they repeat the same destructive pattern again and again in their lives. Not because they enjoy hurting others, but because anger gives them something they don't know how to get healthily in a different way. Let's talk about the cost. Anger destroys trust. It destroys emotional safety. It destroys marriages. It destroys careers, friendships. It destroys mental health. And most tragically, anger destroys the very same person who gets angry first and foremost. Because chronic anger, consistent chronic anger leads to anxiety, depression, hypertension, heart issues, insomnia, guilt, shame. And the person who keeps repeating that destructive behavior doesn't realize this, but just feels the symptoms later of this emotional exhaustion. But they don't realize that they are the cause of this problem themselves. Well, it's the ego inside of them that creates the anger to protect itself. But anger ends up destroying everything the ego is trying to protect. So consider the children. Children growing up around parents who are always angry. What goes through their mind when they're witnessing this anger, uncontrolled anger between the spouses? They learn that behavior, that this is normal behavior, that perhaps they normalize as they're growing up. They think that this is something that I should do when I grow up with my spouse, with my partner. This is the way you communicate with people in anger. People are unpredictable. Silence is safer than honesty. Anger is how adults resolve problems. Well, that's what the child will think, which is not true. A child raised in that environment of anger will grow up to become an angry person or a timid, fearful adult, because that may cause them to withdraw, emotionally withdraw, and process that pain of anger which they have witnessed in a different way. Very rarely they will experience anything in between. It's going to be these two polar extremes. So mastering anger is not just self-improvement, it's breaking generational patterns of trauma and behavior. As I say, monkey see, monkey do. So that's why we need to set a different example of how we express ourselves. This is why I keep repeating myself that it's not you. When you get angry, there's an entity inside of us, which is our ego, which is controlling us, which is the one that has had the script written for it from childhood perhaps, which is a software which automatically runs on autopilot when certain things trigger us and we think it's us. Yes, it becomes part of our identity, but it's the ego that which we can still train, which we can still tame, which we can still control before it controls us through this anger. And as you can see, this uncontrolled anger, how it's affecting your life in a negative way. So there's different facets of this ego in terms of how it tricks you into expressing that anger. Listen, another one here. Let me just expose another clever trick of the ego when it makes you angry. And what is that? That's anger disguised as morality. When you justify yourself, people say, I only get angry because I'm right. I only get angry because the other person was shouting and he deserved it or she deserved it. And they constantly find ways to justify themselves. Oh, I'm principled. I normally don't get angry. I'm standing up for myself. They violated me. Sometimes that's true. Yes, of course, as I mentioned earlier, anger has its place. It's not something which is totally forbidden. There's a time and place when you should get angry, when you're standing up for justice. But the many times, unfortunately, when you do get angry, it's your ego. You're not always standing up for justice. And here's the test. Does your anger make you a better person, or does it make you a smaller person? Does it uplift you, or does it degrade you? Does it defend the truth, or it's just defending your pride? So this is the litmus test that you need to put yourself through. Are you correcting any wrongs or injustice with your anger, or is it just feeding your ego? And the answer is that it's protecting your pride and your ego and stopping you from feeling small. Then your anger isn't immoral, isn't moral. It's just an outburst of emotional immaturity. So, how do we regain control? How do we become a better person? By not letting this anger overtake us and in the process have these unintended consequences which break our friendships, our relationships, and damage us even more. First and foremost, you need to diagnose that you have a problem. Be aware and recognize the physical signs before the explosion. Admit that you've got an anger problem. Many people don't even admit that they have an anger problem. Admit it when you are about to get angry. The heartbeat starts rising fast, the chest starts getting tightened, the shallow breathing starts. Catch that anger early so you are able to control it. And then there's a way of delaying your actions in order to diffuse the anger. Just take a few extra moments. Let's say 5-6 seconds is all it takes to reset your emotional brain. Take a deep breath. Pause. And even ancient wisdom is that if you are standing, sit down. If you are sitting, lie down. This automatically has a huge effect on diffusing that anger. So it causes that delay. Rather than you acting impulsively in haste, it causes that delay which can make a huge amount of difference between you getting angry and you manifesting that anger in terms of actions and lashing out to the people around you. This alone can save your marriage, your job, your friendships, your future. So let's reframe things. So ask yourself, what is the anger actually protecting? Are you acting in haste to protect your ego? Your ego has been triggered, it's been scratched, it's been undermined. Often it is that. It's that insecurity, that fear, that inadequacy that gets highlighted when someone triggers us off, when someone says something which we don't like. So this is an acknowledgement that you have to have that why is it that you're getting angry? Is it because your pride has suffered? Is it because someone's made you feel a bit small than you would like to project yourself to be? So ask yourself that. Sometimes not every battle is worth fighting. Not every situation is worth investing in terms of our anger, our energy. It's better to refrain and not get angry. And as I've mentioned, that this is like the animal inside of you. This ego is like an out of control, untrained animal that needs to be trained, controlled. It's like a child. Let's say a child is crying for sweets and the parents say, all right, I'll shut up, have a sweet. And the child knows that each time it cries, it's going to get more sweets, it's going to get more chocolates, it's going to get more treats, and then it becomes a repetitive behavior, and the parents keep feeding that behavior, and the child then becomes out of control. It's exactly the same with your anger. It's like that child that's constantly crying. It's like that animal that is constantly barking, constantly biting, and it runs the risk of biting, damaging, hurting people. And you need to train the animal. Recognize this is an out of control animal that lives inside of us. It actually is. It's another living entity. I'm going to suggest some other out of the box solutions, which not only will give you control in that instant moment when you're feeling angry, but even prior to that, as a build up, it will weaken that emotion inside of you, so you're not lashing out and getting angry at the slightest trigger. And these things are what will help you control that animal inside of you. Number one, if you feel extremely angry, you're about to get angry, have a cold shower. Number two, practice fasting. Because fasting, when the body is deprived of food and has less food inside of it, then there's less things inside of us which trigger these emotions, trigger these senses in our body. Because when you're really feeling weak, feeling tired because of fasting, you won't get that angry easily, because it's all that food, the fast food, all the junk, all the spices, all the chemicals that go into our body, which also exacerbate that emotion of fasting, emotion of anger. Fasting is a solution. Intense exercises, again, that's another way of lessening the anger, because you're channeling that energy into something else. And this is exactly what Napoleon Hill talked about decades ago in his book, famous book, Think and Grow Rich, that you have energy that which you can redirect. It could be, I mean, he talks about sexual energy, but it's exactly the same with this emotional energy that we have. We redirect it into something else more fruitful. And in this instance, I'm talking about actual exercise. Another one is practice long periods of silence, because it's our tongue when we say the wrong thing and we end up getting into trouble, we end up getting triggered. And this is why, if you practice long periods of silence, you will engage less with other people unnecessarily. A lot of the conversations we have with people, either they're vulgar, they're useless, and they are just more than unnecessary. Unnecessary in the sense that we should speak less with wisdom rather than speak lots and speak in a sort of inappropriate and useless manner. The other thing is, you can perhaps journal, create some sort of a journal which keeps a track of your daily activities and the things that you do, and this will help you monitor your behavior as to, you got angry on this day, this is what triggered you off today. And if you keep doing that, then it keeps you, it creates a pattern for you to be able to observe what are the things that which trigger you off. Maybe you can avoid those situations, avoid those triggers, and take more charge of your life. These things will build the emotional resilience inside of you. So the more you resist that urge to get angry, the more you will be rewiring your brain to stop getting angry at that instantaneous moment. So this brain will have an update of its software. Then also, how about practicing the state of humility? Because the ego cannot survive humility. Humility doesn't mean weakness. This is something that which I had trouble with growing up, and for a long time, thinking that when you're more humble to people, the more you are expressing your weakness and your vulnerability. But it's not like that. Humility is opposite of arrogance, and if anything, it helps build strong character. As I've mentioned before, anger has its place, but majority of the times we exercise that emotion in the wrong way, whereas humility will allow you to become a person of greater honesty, integrity, and respect in the eyes of others. It means that you don't need to dominate people to feel powerful. It means that you replace the ego anger with emotional intelligence. And this is something that we will be doing a whole different sort of program on, just on emotional intelligence. So we all know about IQ, but not many people know about EQ, emotional intelligence. So this is something that we will be discussing and dissecting in more detail in a future episode. So just to recap, anger is not the enemy. The real enemy is the ego that is living inside of us, which feeds the anger. Every time you explode that ego, the inner enemy that lives inside of us wins. Every time you stay calm, you win. And you show that inner enemy that you are in control. Because when you lash out and let that ego dominate you, then you have actually surrendered and subdued to that enemy within. So if you master your anger, you master your life. And if you let that anger master you, you destroy everything meaningful around you, because the greatest strength is not the ability to overpower others. The greatest strength is to be able to overpower your ego. Let me repeat that. The greatest strength is not the man who is physically stronger than others and is able to overpower them. The greatest strength is of the person. The man is the strongest who has the ability to overpower his ego, which resides inside of him. The next time anger rises inside of you, just remember you are stronger than your impulses. Over the next many episodes, we are going to consistently teach and train this ego inside of us, that which is causing the biggest problems in our lives. Even things like loneliness, addictions, lusts, envy, all these things are driven from this enemy within. And we start one by one learning all the different ways that it is controlling us. Like today, we looked at anger, and anger is a very big issue in our society, and every single one almost suffers in some degree or some shape. As I said, it's not totally forbidden, it shouldn't be totally forbidden, but it's something that which needs to be managed intelligently inside of us, because once you reclaim that emotion, so where you can control it and you can master it, as I've mentioned, you will master your life. You'll master all your relationships, and life will be much more better going forwards, knowing how to control anger than leaving it uncontrolled and letting it destroy your life.